That's the biggest, to me, indicator of whether or not an interview is going well. Is if I can get into a business conversation with you, then we're cooking. If you're just waiting for me to ask the next question, this is going horribly bad.
Did you fill them mostly from your network? Did you fill them from like your VC talent investors? Did you post the roles?
If we're talking about true executive level hiring, if this is going to be a C-suite peer, never post it. It's all about, either a retained search with an external partner.
The ability to kind of figure out what people are world-class at and design the role for them versus just putting pegs in the hole.
Is the underpinning of a great hiring process and a great onboarding experience to me is focus on like a simple question. How do I set you up for success?
Welcome to How I Hire, the podcast where we talk with senior go-to-market leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow new talent. Today, I'm joined by Mike Weir. Mike is the CRO of Finalis, a deal platform for capital markets. Previously, Mike was CRO of G2 and worked in sales leadership at LinkedIn. Mike's also an advisor to some great startups. That's actually how I met him. So Mike, great to meet you. Great to reconnect. Thanks for coming on today.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
No, I've enjoyed some of the companies you've led revenue at, and I'm excited to dive in. We were talking about some stuff on the prep call, and we'll have some fun. Maybe as you stepped into Finalis, which is smaller scale than some of the ones you'd been at before, I'm curious, like how you assessed the leadership team and kind of the holes that there were, and how you built out the leadership team underneath you.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting actually. So Finalis is an amazing company, but definitely much earlier stage than where I've been in my past. And so I actually spent a good amount of time with some peers who had come from earlier stage companies to help me in my assessment and help me plan for the transition. Because get my hands dirty, be in the execution mode with the team, like that wasn't a concern. I've always been that way in the way I operate, and I'm there for my team, but obviously trying to make sure I'm not overdoing it. I'm not too much in the weeds, but at early stage company like this, you got to be in the weeds. You got to be helping out. And so evaluating, where we were at was a foundational first task for me, even before accepting to come to Finalis. That was, one of the great conversations that Federico, the founder of Finalis, and I had was just the vision for the company, what the existing leadership team was structured like, what their core capabilities were, where he was looking to be adding talent in the future based on that vision, and really kind of beating that vision up, talking through what the structure of the team looked like, what alternative futures could look like as we had success or didn't have success, proving things out in the go-to-market motion. As an example, we had a vision of building relationships with capital seekers, aka CEOs of companies that wanted to do capital raising, that wanted to sell their business. And that was a part of the early hypothesis that Fed and I had talked about, and I was going to hire around a partnerships org for it. But we started doing early testing and realized no, actually, the better starting point is going to the end of the deal lifecycle, where our bankers are looking for investors, they're looking for buyers, and they want to bring a more competitive process to the table. So we actually pivoted and ended up, changing the hiring plans, changing the profile of who we wanted in that leadership role to look at building out a whole capital markets function for us that was going to, think and operate like our own kind of internal investment banking team, and was able to get out there and build relationships with venture capital, private equity, family offices, and other places. And so I think the big learning for me was you start with a blueprint of what the vision tells you need to do for how to structure the executive team, how to structure the senior leadership team. You're understanding what you want each of those roles to accomplish, but you're going to make changes. And you've got to be very open and very quick to adapt when the business and the market are telling you that you have, it's not working, or you have a better opportunity to take advantage of.
I love that. You touched on something I haven't touched on with any other guests, which is how do you get empowered as a senior leader to be able to be successful in hiring, right? And it's not like the plan gets baked for 2025 and you go execute on that. The plan is constantly changing. So I think that's really neat to hear how, as you were picking the company, as you were joining the leadership, it's like it's who you work for as a senior leader that you feel empowered enough to make those changes. That's neat. What was the first senior role you felt like you needed when you joined the company? Like, and how did you identify that? And maybe we don't have to get into specifics, or we can, but how did you fill that role?
Yeah, I think for me, it was pretty obvious because we were really early stage. So my frontline leadership team was not built out. So one of the very first leadership hires I brought in was a head of revenue operations. And then it was a fast follow to be, as quickly as I could to find the right person, head of marketing.
Yep.
And so I think in both instances, we had what most earlier stage companies have is we had amazing individual contributors who were getting all the tasks done. But obviously, the immediate feedback was like, I need some more like coaching. I need some more help. I need to get ahead of what's going on. We need to have a better plan.
Yeah.
And so the first hire I made within 1 month, I think it was, technically he started about a month after I started, was bringing in that head of revenue operations, who's I see as a CRO, that's my brain trust. That is my critical must-have right-hand person and team that does two core things for the business, right? Is one, they partner deeply with me to really understand what is working within the business, how are we tracking against our OKRs, what else should we be doing to be able to get on track to hit our numbers, or to double down where things are going exceptionally well. But I also want that head of revenue operations to be somebody that is an ambassador for the overall business. And they are the person, and I talk to my CEO about this, talk to our VP of finance about this. It's like, this person also needs to keep me accountable, needs to keep my team accountable. And so that's why I wanted, their very strong opinions of whether or not they thought that the head of revenue operations that we were about to extend an offer for, it's like, do you think this person can command the room, can earn your trust, can be somebody you will look to say, like, no, I'm not just taking like Weir's word for it. Like, you agree with this plan, you agree these other objectives, you agree that the fundamentals of the business will support us reaching these outcomes by the end of the year. And the CEO and VP of finance, they were nodding and saying, yeah, we think this person can get there. So that was the first hire.
I love that in so many ways. Like as a former RevOps leader, my last two unicorns have been exactly that. Like new COO, CRO comes on in, and within 2 to 3 months. I think it's interesting, right? Because oftentimes companies will grow up with people where they maybe haven't done it before and they've learned, and then you jump over that to be able to find those people that can. How did you said you closed this person in a month? Was this somebody within your network, or did you have to go out and search for it, or were you kind of like quietly looking as you were starting your role? Normally, I find it's the 3 to 4 months after a CRO joins, this VP of RevOps gets hired. Hopefully, they don't kick the existing team out and they build on. They bring additional capabilities on top. But how did you find that person so fast?
Yeah, this one I was incredibly fortunate because they had actually already had somebody in process when I got there.
Yep.
And so I got the cheat code and was like, okay, great. I'm going to meet with some folks that you've already been meeting with. And I chose to not get their perspectives up front. I wanted to just walk in for my own opinion because frankly, like we were still getting to know each other as a leadership team on our executive team. And so it's like, I don't want to be biased. I want to walk into meeting the top candidates, forming my own opinion, and then reviewing what their feedback says about them and see how well triangulated we are. And that in and of itself created some really great alignment conversations between myself, the CEO, the VP of finance, and others about like, hey, you're looking for these things, but I actually really need the head of RevOps over on these other things, right? So what you're prioritizing is not the biggest, most important stuff. We need to have the person doing these things, right? Like I need them doing segmentation, market analysis. I need them identifying what's our serviceable, obtainable market, and then helping me operationalize a plan around attacking where we've prioritized our bets, right? And you guys haven't been pushing these candidates around segmentation examples. You haven't been pushing them on business planning rhythms. Like, that's the stuff I pushed on. And this person really shined in those areas. And that's why they're my number one.
It's a fascinating pattern, right? Like, as an executive interviewing, when a new CRO comes in, the whole process changes. At the same time, they get to work for somebody much more experienced than you, that you've seen at other places before and can bring that. So I'm almost imagining the RevOps people that were in that process when they're like, hello, welcome to our new CRO. They're like, oh my God, the whole process has changed, how they're evaluating has changed, but they get a much higher quality person to work with as well too. So it's just a fun dynamic that I think a lot of people deal with. It's like, I'm in process, but oops, I'm now interviewing with somebody different than I interviewed with before. So that's a neat one to hear about.
Which is, I guess far better than you just got in seat and then like 2 weeks later, a new CRO shows up and has a completely different perspective and different way of working. And that's not the ideal way for a mid-level, senior level leader to join the organization. So I was glad that we were able to sequence things where I was able to join, and then I just spent my time rounding out my leadership team: head of revenue operations, head of marketing, head of customer success. Those were all roles that I hired within my first. Technically, I think it took about 8 months to get all those leadership roles filled.
Did you fill them mostly from your network? Did you fill them from like your VC talent investors? Did you post the roles? How do you go about that? And you've probably dealt with it at bigger companies too, where you post one of those roles and you get 1,000 or 2,000 applicants. Yeah. How did you approach that, or how do you approach it?
Yeah, I think I approach it in different ways. So if we're talking about true executive level hiring, if this is going to be a C-suite peer, never post it. It's all about, either a retained search with an external partner, or, maybe for a short period of time, you're tapping into the friends and family. It's like, hey, we're going to go to each one of our venture capital investors. If that's where our investor pool is from, we're going to go to all of the folks within our own networks. But I think you only do a short period of time to see if, like, hey, do we already know the right person? But these are critical roles that can take a really long time to fill, to put somebody into a C-suite type role. So don't wait too long before you get expert help to really build out a very robust pool of candidates. For, kind of call it head of, which usually equates to roughly a kind of a senior director-ish title, the VP level, we do post those. I do find that we get some great surprise candidates. Heck, I just brought in a new VP of member experience, and she's phenomenal. Was not in my network. Yes, I did have some shared connections with her, and sure, I back channeled a little bit to get perspectives from those folks in addition to the references that she had directly provided. But I think that it's great when you can expand, and especially when you're looking for culture add, when you're looking for additive talent. Yeah, and this is classically drilled into me through my training and growing up as a leader at LinkedIn. Is like, hey, your network is often populated by people that look and have similar experiences to you. So if you want to get outside of that, if you want to hire different profiles, if you want wholly new experiences, like, you got to get outside of your network at some point. And so I like the idea of you post it and you do the kind of private searching through your networks, through your investors, through your advisors, and get a very well-rounded set of candidates to be able to consider.
I like it. That's about the line. By the way, I had a great surprise candidate off the street from my director of SOPs role at Carta. It was you can get surprised and you can meet people you never would have met otherwise. I agree. You drew the line about where I draw it. It's like at the head of /VP is about where you draw it. You also sound like you felt very passionate about you don't post above that line. Why do you think that? I tend to draw it about the same place, but why do you think that?
Yeah, I think there's so much time and effort that should go into planning for what the next set of skills and experiences need to be for your CRO, your chief product officer, whomever it may be. That it is so custom to your environment, your company, your stage, and what you need next.
Yes.
That I found that it's just kind of a waste of time to publicly post it for two key reasons. Is oftentimes you're not going to disclose that publicly of what you're specifically looking for. Obviously, if you have competition, then they can search and be like, "Ooh, they're looking to go in, these couple of directions. I should be thinking about that too." So there's competitive reasons you don't want to post some of this stuff.
Yeah, agreed.
Thus, you can't, give enough information to help kind of winnow down a candidate pool. And that leads to the other thing is like I've just seen too many applications that are wildly unqualified.
Yep.
Or have the core criteria like, have you been a CRO before? Yes. Oh, okay, great. But have you been a CRO in these type of instances? Have you lived through these situations? Have you done what we're going to need you to do? Because the underpinning of a great hiring process and a great onboarding experience to me is focus on like a simple question. How do I set you up for success?
Yes.
That is the simplest question, the best barometer of like, if I can do a really good job discerning what the old job description said versus what the job description needs to say and has a vision for what is this role, what is this function going to have to do in a year, 2 years, 3 years, I got to future-proof it right now in who I'm hiring to have new skills, knowledge, experiences, all that stuff to cover what the role needs to be accomplishing 2-3 years from now. So that I don't hire somebody who's going to kind of outkick their coverage and 2 years from now, I'm like, geez, I got to get somebody new again. Like that's not a great way to build a strong senior leadership team is to like perpetually be hiring a new CRO, new CMO every 2 years. And so I want to build out the great job description. I want to purposely recruit executive talent that has what I believe is going to set them up for success. Now, I love getting into business level conversations in the interview processes to have my ideas challenged, to have our thinking challenged, to push on our vision and have somebody really shine who comes through the interview process to say like, okay, one, this is great. Like you're already getting it. You're already challenging it. You're already giving new ideas. I'm not looking for perfection in your ideas because you don't know the inner workings of Finalis, where I'm at right now. You don't know this market as well as we know this market in some instances, right? And so, like, I know you're going to throw some stuff out there that is not going to sound right and probably isn't right in some cases, but I'm not holding it against you. What I want is prove to me that you can think, adapt, and be incredibly resilient in how you would help us, build this organization into the potential that we know it has. And so I feel like there's too much wasted time if you're not cultivating a very specific pool of, proven executives that have the right experience types to fit the need of the business that you're sitting in for that hire.
So well said. Two thoughts. One is, I think I teach a lot of execs that we have within Whisper to have the discipline not to chase after every role, but know what you're great at and be good there. I think the other point I would make that I've observed a couple times and been done to me is you're actually building the role and the org structure around the candidate in some cases, right? Like when I joined Carta, they were like, great, here's what the org looks like today. What's missing? What do we need? And we started to piece it together. And I think for those senior level candidates, the role may not be what you post. It may be something where you find somebody that's got like, wow, you've got this amazing superpower. Let's go figure out, like, is the role currently well designed for you? Like, for example, I've run RevOps at 4 unicorns. I've never run incentive comp, ironically, but I just don't like it. And so they were like, it's in the finance team. Do you want it? I'm like, no, I don't want it. And so the ability to kind of figure out what people are world class at and design the role for them versus just putting pegs in the hole, I think is maybe a supplement to everything you just said, which is so great.
Yeah, and I think they're a great example from roughly 7 months ago. I was speaking to the CEO and founder of a very hyper growth company, and one of the interesting things that led to he and I having the conversation was he was going out there to hire a new chief sales officer, and I was just like, okay, why chief sales officer? Why not? Why isn't this labeled as a CRO? it was probably the most thoughtful. I won't get into all the details. It was probably the most thoughtful response that I've gotten about the intentionality of, well, we had a CRO, we're going to a CSO, and here's all the reasons why. And ultimately, it was really about focus and what needed to be perfected over the next 2 to 3 years as they were going to go from, pacing towards 100 million in ARR towards 300 million in the coming years, and saying, I need somebody who is just laser focused on the acquisition engine and perfecting that. And so I don't want the distractions of a full CRO scope. I want somebody that just is really great and passionate about this particular scope.
But I see them as a C-level rather than a
absolutely
VP level hire.
But they need to report to me. I need visibility to this. I need to make sure I have somebody that's seasoned enough, who has been through it, who can build the strategy, who can build the vision, who can be a complement to our long-term, 3-year, 5-year plans. But I don't want them distracted by customers. I don't want them distracted by partnerships. And so I'm pushing those into other parts of the organization to be owned. And maybe in 3-5 years, we'll bring it all together again. But for what we need right now, this is what we're doing. I'm like, I love the fact that you are explicit and you can explain it. Because you know what? The best candidates you have out there are going to push you on that point.
Yeah.
If nobody's challenging, why isn't this a full scope CRO role? Then you should question whether or not they're ready for it.
Honestly, there are a lot of CEOs. This was a CEO or a CRO?
The CEO that I was talking to, who was going to be hiring the chief sales officer.
It's honestly well thought through. I see a lot of CEOs not think these stuff through structurally. And it's like, I think it's okay to believe one way or the other, but if you don't have anything to back it up, you're just like, this is what I think. You can struggle. Personally, I always say it's harder, and I'd be curious your take on this one, to report to a CRO that only has sales, because then you've got, if the final decider, you always want a final decider for go-to-market. And if that final decider for go-to-market happens to also be the CEO, the reality is they have fundraising, board, leadership, culture, product, everything like that. And so I've often personally resisted ending up rolling up to a CRO that is actually a CSO. It sounds like your role here is a full CRO in my sense, but I'd be curious, just stepping back, not just at this company, but generally, how would you advise a senior go-to-market leader, whether that's a head of marketing or whatever it is, to pick between working for a CEO that's deciding between marketing and sales versus a CEO that's delegated that decider responsibility?
Yeah, so that did become one point of the conversation with this CEO. Is I love the intentionality. I completely get it. This is going to put you at the intersection of detail level planning. And why is because the time is going to come where trade-offs have to be decided. And if you have a full stack CRO, they're the one that makes that decision on your behalf.
Yeah.
Right? Am I hiring more CSMs? Am I hiring more BDRs? Am I hiring more AEs, AMs? They're the ones that's looking across the whole customer life cycle. They're the one that's doing the long-term planning of how many new logos are we expecting to bring in? What's the burden that's going to create in the onboarding? How many customers are we going to be managing? How much can I get in expansion? They're going to be thinking through all of that with their head of revenue operations.
And they've got to see that pipeline handoff funnel conversion conversation because they're that intersection between those two in that case.
So they have to be, if they're in charge of all aspects of revenue, they have to be thinking about the whole customer journey, and they have to be planning for it, and they make the decisions for you. And ideally, they're keeping you well informed on the really material decisions that they're making. This means if you have a CSO, they're going to do what you want. They're going to be solely focused on how do I win as many new logos as possible, and then, if you coach them well, if you set the expectation, they will think about how do I do a great handoff to the customer success team over here. And hopefully you're doing a good job building operational OKRs in the business that, kind of keeps them accountable to saying I can't just close whatever logo under the sun and then hand over a bunch of horrible fit customers to my customer success team and create bad gross retention. So like, think about that gray area, but you're the decision maker now. Like now you have to plan those OKRs.
Yeah.
Now you have to be the one that keeps the leadership team, the executives collaborating and aligned. And so that's a burden to put on a CEO when you have so many other things that you have to be a part of. But that was, in this instance, there was a trade-off he was more than willing to make and was consciously making.
But he was conscious making. I think a lot of CEOs like, I want to be the decider for everything, bring it up to me, but they don't realize what that actually means. What you just described is if you're going to be the CEO and effective CRO, you've got to be prepared to get in the weeds more than you may want to get. But it sounds like this gentleman in particular was like, he understood those trade-offs, which is nice.
Yeah. And I would say, for folks that are like, if you are a founder or CEO, it's incredibly important to understand what stage your company is and what stage you're moving into.
Yes.
Because the biggest mistake, and this, I shouldn't even say it as a mistake. I think one of the things that was fantastic about, when I came to G2, we were in the process of, the ELT being kind of reshaped. And it was like, hey, what got us here isn't going to get us to 100 million plus in ARR, right? We now have to start building for scale. We have to be thinking about repeatability. And that's where, Godard in this case was looking for leaders that had already built through scale, that had already done this, and to say, I need people that can think ahead. I need people that can be great advisors and partners to me and the rest of the business. And so again, he was also very intentional in the hiring process of like, I want to bring on a chief product officer, a chief revenue officer who've, built through scale. And we're going to look at how do we create operational process, rigor, metrics that allow us to go from, what we did in my time at G2 was, just under 1,500 customers around the world to over 3,500 customers around the world. And like, that's a lot of new logos to find, convince, onboard, and retain over time. And that, that was something that, the prior regime was amazing leaders, but they're like, I like earlier stage. It's like, that's cool. Like, not all of us are purpose fit to stay with companies from inception through a multi-billion-dollar IPO. Like, I'm not a public CRO. I don't aspire to be a public CRO. That's not my focus, right? I want to build hyperscale businesses. So, I think that's a key part of, planning for what are you looking for, and then how you operationalize these roles is, it is the job description. It is the things that you expect from them. And then, making sure that you get the right person in the role for what you need in the moment.
There's so many people that don't take the time up front to think about stage clarity, company type clarity, sales model clarity. They're just, I want to roll. And I'm like, that you're not going to be successful. You touched on something. I guess there's two things I'd love to attack. One, you talked about how do I set you up for success, but maybe first I'd love to talk about how do you evaluate the candidates that are in front of you? Like, what do you have approaches to interviews, philosophies, favorite interview? Like, what are you doing to evaluate, call it like senior leaders that work for you?
Yeah, so a couple of things. You've kind of heard me mention this previously, but I do think, and this flows into how I kind of operationalize the talent management process, within my team, within the companies that I'm at, is I really think about skills, knowledge, experiences. And the core for me as I go into a interview process, whether it's hiring an executive peer or a senior leader, director, senior director, VP plus level individual, is, up front, you're nailing what is this function and this specific person have to accomplish. And I want to look at a short-term, long-term lens so that, the classic question is going to come out, and I want to make sure I'm very prepared to answer is like, when you're in an interview, like when I was interviewing folks for the VP role, question was, okay, what do you need this role to accomplish in the first 6 months? And then, another question that typically comes is like, all right, what keeps you up at night? my answer is not necessarily the same to both of those questions.
Mhm.
There are things that need to be fixed immediately that keep me up at night. But most of what keeps me up at night is, what do I need 12 months and 24 months from now that the business isn't ready for yet?
Yes.
And it's like, how do I bridge that gap, right? I need great leaders that understand the vision, that add to the vision, and that help get us operationally prepared to realize that vision. And so I like getting into a process and knowing, this is what the job description looks like now.
Mm-hmm.
Now I want to see, what are the skills, what's the knowledge, what's the experiences that I'm explicitly looking for to know if this candidate has a chance of being set up for success. And then once I'm in that conversation, I structure the interviews to make sure that, each person that's in the process, they know, like, what's the core insight that I'm looking for you to probe on. And then, of course, like, because you're in the conversation, you have your own things that you want to, learn and test on, because you're going to be partnering with this role in most cases. It's like, make sure to get this insight for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then let me know what else you're going to be probing on that's really important to you. Because that gives me another signal of like, hey, what is the product team thinking about for my new head of sales? What is the customer success team thinking about? What's the head of marketing thinking about? And it helps me to triangulate and understand, what are some things that I didn't scope well in the job description? What are things that I'm not thinking about well enough in the hiring process that, folks that are going to be critical internal partners have like at the top of their list, and it was not on my radar at all.
I think a lot of hiring managers, unfortunately, just say, great, here's the job eval. Here's what I need you to evaluate. I like how you're doing it, which is, no, what do you care about in this role? You may learn something in that process. You may be like, wait, before we start the interview process, I need to recalibrate with you on what I actually mean for this role. So I think there's a lot in that, in the way you frame that. One of the questions I always love to ask if I'm not hiring manager is, in your own words, describe the role you're interviewing for. I'd say 75 to 80% of people take themselves out of the process right there because they can't articulate what the role is. And then, to your point, take the opportunity to be, and here's where I think it could go as well too.
Yeah, I think inherent in part of your thought there is, I want to see that people actually did their homework. I'm not expecting you to have committed a whole week of research. Like, if you're interviewing for this, most likely you've got a good day job right now. So I have tempered expectations about how much time you can put into it. But at the same point, if you show up and you have done no research on my website, you have done no research on me, you clearly haven't read the full job description that's been kind of meticulously prepared and posted, and given to you in advance, like that's an immediate disqualifier, right? Yeah. And just like, take Finalis as a great example. The people that really shone through in the interview process for the head of roles, they openly acknowledge, like, I don't come from investment banking. I don't really know that much about what a broker dealer is. But here's everything I learned researching Finalis on the website, based on all my Google searches. Like, they came in with acknowledgement. I have imperfect knowledge.
Yeah.
But then they went right into, here's some of my observations. Here's some of my thoughts. These could be totally off, but I'm thinking about the business. I'm trying to start thinking about how I would operate in the role, because that's the biggest, to me, indicator of whether or not an interview is going well. Is if I can get into a business conversation with you, then we're cooking. If you're just waiting for me to ask the next question, this is going horribly bad. If you have no questions for me, and that's another part that I purposely structure into my interview process, is like, I am going to pre-wire a lot of this time to get what I need. But I'm always leaving time open to ask you. And I actually frame it at the front and the back. When I open interviews, especially like as I go more towards like IC levels.
Yes.
But like ICs and middle management, I'm going to ask them right up front. I want to make sure you have the right context. So you've already had these conversations with my recruiter, maybe with some of the people on my leadership team. You've been researching us, wink, wink. Hopefully you can say that. Like, But yeah, if you haven't, you're out. I'm already going to be putting my feedback in. No, but it's like, what context can I give you? Like, what questions can I answer about the company, about the team, about the role itself? Like, give me those questions up front before I jump into a bunch of specific questions so that you have the right context to give me the right examples, to give me the right, case of why you're the perfect person for this job. And so I give that opportunity up front, and then I re-ask it again at the end. But differently, it's like, hey, what other questions do you have for me? The thing that I absolutely despise is when it's just like, oh no, I've asked everybody else questions.
I'm 110% with you. We've got like 2 playbooks all about this. One of my favorite ways I always coach execs is I go even further, which is when I'm interviewing with you, I always say, hey, Mike, I'm really looking forward to it. I got a bunch of questions, but I'm excited. Why don't we start with yours? Most interviewers are so A, lazy, or B, they want to hear that. And they're like, no, why don't you start? And so then I own the interview from there forward, right? Like because I'm not going in to be interviewed. I'm going in to interview you. And that's a very different mentality that I think I try to get people to bring into it, right? You're not to sit back there and wait for the interviewer to do it. You can take control of that process if you are proactive and interested. And that's the type of employee you want, right? It's the one that's going to be bringing you insights or ideas or, Mike, have you thought about this? Or have you done this? Or how are we looking at this?
Yeah, especially as you get into more senior leadership roles. It is all about proactive. It is about, having a strategy, having a vision. So if you're not asking questions, if you're not trying to understand, if you're not bringing some thoughts to the table, then, those are indicators of like, you're just waiting to be told what to do. That's not what makes a great senior leader. Now, I will say, important caveat is, you got to be really careful to create a balance. Like, you don't know the personality and the style of the person you're interviewing with. So I like the way you phrase it, which is like, I have a bunch of questions for you. We can start with yours. Like, you got to give them the option. And then as the conversation's going, give a couple pauses to be like, hey, I really appreciated the conversation, you answering my questions and the dialogue. Do you want to go to any of your questions?
Yes. You can't steamroll the interviewer yourself. That would be
that's been the pitfall that I've seen where, it's been like the first half, I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, this person's done a bunch of research. They got some great questions. We're really into it. And then we're like 3/4 of the way through. And I'm like, I haven't got to ask any of the questions yet that I need to ask. And then my opinion starts circulating in my brain. I'm like, yeah, maybe this person's a little long-winded. Maybe they're a little bit too focused on their own ideas. Maybe they're not open to, feedback. And so I start building some assumptions. And so in some cases, I've had to kind of cut people off and be like, really appreciate all these questions. Got to make sure I get through 3 on my own.
That's also the EQ, right? To be able to be like, it's not all about my questions. It's also about the person interviewing me. I got to make sure I give enough space for them.
Yeah. But your approach, I mean, to me, that's how you stand out in an interview. And we actually have that as one of the things in our interviewing process is like, we're looking for how good were their questions.
I love that. Kind of in the last couple minutes, maybe let's just talk about how do you make somebody successful? I think that you were passionate about that. I am as well too. What are your tricks, tactics, approaches to that once you've hired them?
Yeah, I want to make sure I spend, a good amount of time one-on-one with the individual. So that's obvious and yet still really important to reinforce. I think it's hard, right? Because especially if you're a C-level individual and your time and attention is getting pulled in so many different directions, you just have to be incredibly intentional to protect the time.
Yeah.
And make sure that you're mapping it out. What I've done in my past lives is I'll build an onboarding spreadsheet and pre-map out as much of the first 3 weeks of meetings as possible for the individual.
Yep.
And, that means a series of meetings with me where it's, hey, you're meeting with me as CRO about X, Y, and Z topic. And then meeting number 2 with me again about, A, B, and C topic. Right. And then I'm mapping it out of like, hey, these are your peer leadership, one-on-ones, getting to know you. Like, this is really just about like, how is their team structured? How is the collaboration between the teams right now? And then the second meeting you should have with that peer leader is like, dig in on this specific project, which you're going to have to know about, you're going to have opinions on, you're going to be asked to make decisions on, within your first month. And so I want to map a lot of that out to show them like, here's who to meet, here's when to meet them, here's roughly how long you should spend with them, and this is what you should be talking about.
Yes.
And it's just like, you're going to get a ton of other intros along the way, but I want to make sure to really meticulously map out that onboarding process to ensure you're getting in front of the right people about the right things in your first 2 to 3 weeks, because that's just critical time for foundational knowledge.
I couldn't agree more. It's one boss I had. He's like, I meet with you every day for half an hour at the end of the day. I'd use the same process on other folks as well too, which is similar to the questions. Like, it's your time. What do you have? What are you seeing? What are you observing? What questions do you have? And then I find from there, I can fill in context that I might not have otherwise had.
If you can get folks, like especially leaders, if you can get them some quick wins, aim for that as well as part of the onboarding process.
Mm-hmm.
If you can help avoid some of the really sticky situations, like it happens. It always happens. I don't like having somebody inherit a really bad situation. So in many instances, I'm going to try to at least have us on a path to resolving something before the individual starts.
Yep. Versus
being like, all right, well, by the way, here's the 3 grenades. I need you to kind of figure out where they can go. Like, if there's a talent issue, I want to already have some stuff in motion on that. If there's, a major project, I want to have like an interim person there so that they're not immediately, the executive sponsor that has to start jumping into meetings and everybody's going to look to them and say, what's the decision? Right. And so just think about those, quick wins you can create and think about how can I help create a better situation for them to step into.
I love it. I at some job recently, I was joining and they were like, yeah, this person's not very good. You'll figure it out. I said, well, if you've already made the decision, do you really want me spending 3 more months remaking that decision? And I requested that they fire them before I joined rather than after. And this is somebody that would have reported to me. And I was like, listen, I'd rather have the blank hole and manage the function without them and not have to deal with the cultural stuff. So I really respect your approach on that. I think a lot of people are like, cool, great. I know they kind of suck, but like, let me hire the person. I'll let them figure it out and deal with it. But then they're taking those political arrows right on day one, which is tough.
Yeah. And it happens all the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good. I've almost every single time I've walked into a situation where, you're like, ooh, you just made that decision. I would not have made that decision. And that really, that's very unfortunate. So, maybe tack this onto the advice of like what to do in your interview process. And we did this in recent hires. I like doing technical assessments, yes, right? Like case studies as a key part of that final conversation to really know, like, does this person have what it takes? Can they do this job and lead this team really well? I want to put real scenarios in front of them of stuff that we're struggling through, decisions that have to be made. And again, imperfect knowledge. So I'm not looking for you to, have the perfect idea that I can execute tomorrow. It's more about how are you thinking about it? How, what questions are you asking? Who would you engage with? How would you make the decisions? So that I can, make sure you're going to do a great job once you're in the role and you actually have to solve these things. Right. And so the worst thing that happens, which I try to avoid, is like if there's a known issue or if I have to make a critical decision before you hire and I'm going to offer with you, I'm going to let you know about it.
Absolutely, yes.
And if you really disagree, I'm open to debating that, and it will not change my opinion. It will probably only strengthen my opinion that you're the right person for this job. I haven't yet have it happen where I'm just like, wow, really hated the way the person pushed on me on this, so I'm not going to hire them now. Never has happened, probably will never happen. But more times it has actually led to a slightly different approach to what we were planning to do before they started. Because I've inherited promotions of people where I'm like, this person is not ready for what I expect of this job.
Yes. And
I don't have 3 years to get them ready. I need them functioning at this level like today.
This was amazing. We could run for another hour on this stuff. I realize we are at time, but I thank you so much for doing this one. I had an amazing time, Mike. I've got notes galore and excited to re-listen to it shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for a great conversation. Looking forward to watching more episodes and getting feedback on our chat.
Awesome.